Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Couples Academy show. My name is Hassani. Glad to have you all on this morning. Wherever you're dialing in from around the country, from around the world, let us know so that we could acknowledge you. Listen, we're in a conversation today that I think is critically important that gives us an understanding of what's happening inside of the affair. Okay, but before we do that, make sure you take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Let the people know that we are on. Let's get into this conversation. We're talking about how much time is spent in an affair. How much time is spent in an affair? Oftentimes, couples, when they're going through a recovery process, struggle to spend adequate time. When I'm counseling couples from week to week, the first question I often ask is, well, how was your week? And the answer typically is busy. And from week to week to week, it's more busy. We didn't get a chance to do our homework. We didn't get a chance to have a conversation. We didn't have a chance to connect. We were dealing with work. We were dealing with kids. We were dealing with extracurricular. Time just got, beside us. We just didn't get around to do it. However, the struggle becomes for the betrayed spouse, the amount of time that was spent in the relationship. And if so much time, meaning the affair, and if so much time was spent in the affair relationship, why is it such a struggle to find the same amount of time to spend in this marriage? So I want to ask you a question, folks. How much time do you think is typically spent between an affair partner and a spouse in an affair? Now, there's different types of affairs. There are short-term affairs that last for a few days to a few weeks. And then there are longer-term affairs that last for a few months to a few years. But statistics have shown that there's a certain amount of time on average that the typical spouse spends with their affair partner. Who could tell me what they think that answer is? How about I just tell you? Well, it's 15 hours a week. Now, I want you to think about 5 days a week. That's 3 hours a day. If you look at 7 days a week, that's a little bit over 2 hours a day. Yet and still, couples struggle to find time to spend together 1 hour a week, 2 hours a week, yet 2 hours are spent with the affair partner. And so the question becomes, well, what are they doing? Because it can't be that they're involved physically for all of that time every single day. And oftentimes when an affair is discovered and it's time to go into the full disclosure of that affair, there's a minimization of what was done. Many of us only typically tend to acknowledge the physical aspect, but there's a buildup, whether a slow buildup or a fast buildup, that leads to that physical interaction. And in between the physical interaction, what are we doing with our time? And so obviously, there are 4 particular things that take place in an affair that a marriage should have. And if you're in the recovery process, we want you to identify these 4 things so that you can begin to incorporate them into your relationship. So the first thing is affection. Affection. Whenever I am in the throes of passion, we are physically affectionate, okay? So affection, as we know, according to the 5 love languages, can look different ways for different people. You have words of affirmation, you have quality time, you have giving of gifts, you have acts of service, and you have physical touch. But in the realm of an affair with affection, we're talking about closeness, physical proximity, touching, engaging in some type of embrace that creates more of a passion and a connection with that couple. So there's a lot of affection, and oftentimes during this phase, there's a depletion of affection in the marriage. The second thing that they engage in is recreational companionship. You know, in order to keep this thing secret and hidden, we have to figure out places to go. So let's meet here and let's do that. And I'll meet you on this side of town in this particular area. And they're constantly spending time together in each other's physical presence, whether they are having coffee or having a meal or going out to a movie theater in a place, in a location that nobody thinks that they will be suspected, whether they're going shopping together, just handling daily daily tasks and duties because it's an opportunity to escape. Like, for instance, hey, I'm going to the supermarket, but I'm going to go on the other side of town. He or she's going to meet me there, and I'm going to use this time, kill two birds with one stone, maximize the time that I have by shopping and taking my time, because I'm at the supermarket. What else am I doing? You know what? There was a lot of people there. There was a sale. I had to take my time, but I'm combining that time with time spent with the affair partner. So all types of recreational companionship. Now, keep in mind, oftentimes in a relationship, things have gotten boring and stale, and the things that we used to do, we no longer do. And so the things that I still am passionate about, the things that I still have a desire to do, I find myself doing with the affair partner because not enough space, time, and priority is given to those particular activities in the realm of my marriage. So I use my affair partner to fulfill a desire that is not being met within my union. So number one, we have affection. Number two, we have recreational companionship. Number three, conversation. Isn't it interesting that when you first started your relationship with your spouse, all you did was talk. You talked about everything. You talked about everything under the sun, and you could not resist spending time together just to connect. Now, whether you were talking in person or whether you were talking on the phone, you would spend hours a day talking. You would be texting each other all throughout the day talking. It was a form of connection. You were building a sense of intimacy, right? Intimacy. See into my day, see into my heart, see into my mind. You're connecting in that particular way. But over the course of time, things begin to shift a little bit. And you know what? We've talked about everything. We've exhausted every topic. I know everything about you that I need to know. What is there yet to talk about? And so what happens is there's a staleness, there's a dullness, there's a dryness that begins to consume your relationship. And guess what? There's something about new, because new is sexy. And the new car smell, right? The new vehicle, the new house, the new experience. And so when we enter into new relationships, there's something about that that is intriguing, and it creates a curiosity. And so we find ourselves fully immersed, right? Fully preoccupied with the object of choice, which happens to be the affair partner. And countless hours is spent. Matter of fact, whenever betrayals are discovered, when the phone records begin to be researched, you find hours and hours and hours of conversation on the phone. So I leave for work, and on my drive time, we're talking. We're texting all throughout the day while I'm at work. On my lunch break, we're picking up the phone and talking. When I get back to work, we're texting all throughout the day. At the end of the day, on my way back home, we're calling and we're talking. So all of this time is spent engaging with each other, and it cements the relationship. Okay, these become glue, if you will, that bind individuals together. And the fourth way in which couples spend their time, I'm talking about the affair relationship, is through sexual fulfillment or sexual intercourse. So all of those things, okay, lay a foundation, create an environment for sex. Okay, so a lot of couples, when I say couples, I'm talking about the affair relationship, because they are in a relationship that is hiding in the shadows of their primary relationship, even if it's short-lived. But they're coming together with high passion and desire and finding places to engage in sex. So we're dealing with stolen love, which is the emotional aspect of the affair, and forbidden sex, which is obviously the sexual aspect. Now, with all that I said, we're averaging about 15 hours a week. It may not land that each day it's 2 hours a day. There may be days where we don't talk as much. There may be days where we don't talk at all. And then other days where we're spending countless hours together. But on average, it comes to 15 hours a day. So in the full discovery process, oftentimes in the beginning phase, people aren't completely honest. They're not completely transparent about how much time was spent, because they don't want to give an indication of how deep this thing actually was, how caught up they actually were. And in order to spend 15 hours a day with your so-called busy schedule, you go in early, you stay late, you have all these responsibilities and obligations, yet and still you found 15 hours a week to engage with your affair partner. This becomes a blow to the spouse. It's like death by 1,000 cuts, because that time was taken away from other things that should have been invested in. So, for instance, many people find themselves leaving work, right? So they're escaping their responsibilities to show up at work, which is causing problems in work. They're taking away time that they should have been spending with their children. They're taking away time that they should have been spending with their spouse. They're taking away time that they would have invested in other clear priorities that were essential for life. And they've sacrificed all of those things to be caught up in an entanglement, both emotional and physical, with the affair partner. So when the affair is exposed and the affair relationship has come to an end, and the couple decides that they are ready to move forward in their restoration process, one of the most critical things that has to be protected is time. In the book, The Audacity of Marriage, 10 Principles to Lifelong Partnership, there's a chapter entitled The Time-Rich Marriage. And the reason why we called it the time-rich marriage is to create a solution to the problem. And the problem is, overwhelmingly, many people have a time-starved marriage, no quality time. And so, therefore, what happens is, according to the statistics, in the US and UK, according to the statistics in several studies, the average couple only engages in about 4 minutes of conversation a day. Now, compare 15 hours with an affair partner to a week to 4 minutes a day. So if you figure 4 minutes a day times 7, that's 28 minutes versus 15 hours. And usually these 4 minutes are broken up at the most inconvenient times of the day, when we're multitasking, when we're racing off to work, when we've come home, when we're dealing with the kids, when we're dealing with, we're multitasking, we're in our computer, not looking and trying to have a conversation with our spouse. There's really nothing to talk about. All of our emotions are spent, all of our words are used up. And so we wind up coming home and venturing off into different areas of the home because that's what we typically do. There's no connection. There's no bond. There's no togetherness. There's no opportunity to create that intimacy that one had with the affair partner because they haven't prioritized it. It's not like they don't have the time. They haven't prioritized the time. And because the time has not been prioritized from one day to the next, they never seem to find the time to be able to connect. Yet they'll veg out on their favorite reality show. They'll watch the news. They'll watch sports all night. They'll scroll through social media. They'll read a book. They'll engage in a recreational a recreational activity. They'll connect with a friend. They will Marco Polo. They will text back and forth. They will get on the phone with family and friends. They will do anything to create a distraction to keep them from the primary focus of connecting with their spouse. And so if this is true, that all of this time is spent in the affair, then we have to spend just as much time, if not more, in the marriage to restore the relationship. Do you understand me? 15 hours a week. Now, typically we talk about the two most important days of the week that couples need to engage with each other. It's your work day. It's your play day. The work day is an hour. It's an hour in 168 hours of a work week to work on your marriage. And then your play day is your date night. That's when you have fun. That should take a few hours, but there's still a deficit. And that is not enough. Now, interestingly enough, most people don't even honor that. And they wonder why their recovery process is so slow. Why is this taking so long? Why are we still in this stuck place? Because energy and effort and time was not invested in that recovery process. And so for a period of time, you're going to have to push pause and all the other responsibilities and obligations to prioritize this marriage. Isn't it interesting that even in the scripture, the Bible talks about when you first marry a woman, when a man marries a woman, he should be separate from war and work for 1 year. That means that prior to I do, he would have put in the amount of hours, gained the amount of money, set it aside to be able to financially provide for his wife without any interference of work. Think about the preparation of that. How much money would you have to have saved to not go to work and to not go to war for 1 year. Why was this even a principle or a priority? Because the busyness of life always seems to take place in the realm of a marriage. And if you're truly going to build a healthy foundation, if you're truly going to build roots that are deeply planted in the earth, in order for this tree to be built, you have to do it with time. And the time that you need to engage in the beginning of the relationship, which came natural to you, is the time that you need to engage in, which now has to be intentional for you. Same thing, but with a different approach. So the 4 areas that you have to invest in with your spouse throughout the course of the week are the same areas that you invested with the affair partner. Number 1, there's got to be affection. But I don't want you touching me. Don't touch me. We're not in a good place, and I don't want you to touch me. And so what happens is, if there's a physical disconnect, it will ultimately lead to an emotional disconnect. And the further apart we go, there's a wedge, there's a gap. And that's why someone or something was able to enter in before, because there was this distance, this intentional distance. And so there's got to be a closeness. There's got to be a togetherness. And it's got to be something that you do in order to create the feeling that you want. Now, hear what I said. You got to do something to create the feeling that you want. Most people are waiting for the feeling to come before they do. So once I feel like I'm in a good place with you, then you can touch me. Once I feel attracted to me, then you can touch me. Once I feel safe and protected by you, then you can touch me. The question then becomes, how long does it take to get to that point? How long will it take for your feelings and for your emotions to shift before you're ready to receive your spouse? Now, for many people, this can take a considerably long amount of time. So that means we're putting the recovery process on hold till you feel a certain type of way. That is backwards. It doesn't work like that. The example that I give all the time is sex. Men naturally have this desire for sex. Women oftentimes require something more. That before they engage in sex, they have to be stimulated. Stimulation comes through physical touch. Stimulation comes from emotional connection. Stimulation comes from time spent. Stimulation comes from conversation. So there was no desire at first. These preliminary things had to be done to create the feeling of desire. Are you following me? Well, if that's the case, when it comes to reconciling your marriage, you cannot wait for the feeling to initiate the process. The feeling will come as a result of the things that you do. So when you spend quality time connecting, okay, engaging in affection, it begins the process. Now, what does affection look like when you're in the recovery process? It doesn't look like what it initially looked like in the beginning of the relationship, because there was a natural desire and willingness to engage and to be caught up in each other. But now there's an intentionality. So now we have to figure out what works. What is a safe area? So fine, we can't kiss because that's triggering for you. Okay, we can't have deep penetrating hugs. That's triggering for you. Can we start with holding hands? Can I start by putting my hand on your knee? Are there things that we can do that are not triggering, okay, that you don't have a natural resistance to, that we can start with? Now, once we've started there and we've gotten comfortable and used to that, now what we want to do is move to the next level, because we have to stretch. We can't remain where we started, because if we do, we won't grow. And in order to grow, you've got to stretch. You got to get outside of your comfort zone. So you start with the hand, then you go to the leg, then you go to the arms, then you go to a hug, then you go to a kiss, and you slowly make your way back. This type of affection is important. And this type of affection communicates something. What does it communicate? Because the reality is, everything communicates. When you are distant on the opposite end of the couch from me, that's communicating a message. It communicates that you're disconnected, you're not interested, you don't want to be bothered, you're turned off and turned away from me. That's what it communicates. That's what I read when I read your body language. But when there's physical closeness, it communicates your willingness to want to connect. It communicates a desire that you have to become one with me. So everything communicates, folks, and you got to make sure that you're communicating the right message. And touch is a form of communication. And so when you engage in it, when I touch you, how does it make you feel? Think about it. When you're sad and you're crying and I don't have the words to articulate, but I reach over to you and I just grab your shoulders and I begin rubbing your back. What does that communicate? It communicates something. If you're cooking in the kitchen and I walk past you and I squeeze your butt, what does that communicate? It communicates something. Touch, right? Depending upon the type of touch, where you touch, the quality of that touch, it delivers a message. Are you feeling me? And so in this recovery process, I've got to deliver the message more than with my words, but through my actions and demonstration that I have a desire to build up rapport and build up this intimacy and build up a relationship that's no longer broken, but now healed and restored. And it happens with affection. Do not deny yourself. Do not deny your spouse. Do not deny your marriage what it needs to get to a place of reconciliation. Number two, you've got to begin to spend time in conversation. Now, this is the hardest one. Well, maybe not the hardest one of the hardest ones, because at the end of the day, I don't want to talk to you. I don't even know what to say to you. Every time we talk, we go from 0 to 100. Every time we talk, there's this defensiveness, there's this wall, right? There's this battle that we're having, a battle that we're having with each other, internal battles that we're having with ourselves. So we're triggered by everything. Everything's a loaded term. No matter what I say is misinterpreted, right? So communication is one of the most important skills that you need to develop, because if you don't, it will always lead to more pain, more misunderstanding, more disconnection. And you get to a place where you're ready to throw in the towel, call it quits, give up. Because why? I can't even have a conversation with you. I can talk to my coworker, no problem. I can talk to my best friend, not an issue. I can talk to the pastor or the spiritual leader. I get tremendous guidance. But when I talk to you, it's altogether different. And so you have to establish ground rules of what effective communication looks like when you are in a dark place. We call this having courageous conversations. And in order to have courageous conversations, you've got to show up the right way. This is why we're doing this masterclass December the 16th called Together We Stand. Together we stand in unison, in an agreement, and in oneness because of our ability to properly, effectively communicate that creates breakthrough in the relationship. And so when you're communicating, you have to talk about everything. Now, of course, a lot of time has to be spent talking about the betrayal, because those are the questions that are on the heart and mind of the betrayed spouse. So trust and believe there's a preoccupation during this phase to have constant conversations. So you can't be defensive. You can't minimize. You can't get upset. You've got to engage. But just as much as you're engaging in those type of hard conversations, you have to find time to engage in light conversations, connecting conversations, when you're just conversational, because you have to show that there's something more to engage in rather than the dark issues. Because if all you engage in is the dark issues, it keeps you in a dark place. It keeps you tied to a past hurt and pain that you're trying to get rid of, but you can't, because you're chaining yourself to it through all of the conversations that you're engaging in. Okay, so conversation. So there's a phenomenal book I would encourage you to get. The book is called Intellectual Intimacy, Questions for Lovers and Lovers-to-Be. There's an incalculable number of questions that you can engage in on a variety of different topics that allow you to push pause on all things concerning the affair and talk about other things to find out areas of commonality, areas of interest, areas where you connect so that you can build back this rapport within your marriage. Now, the third thing you got to do with this time is recreational companionship. You got a date. But here's the problem. I don't like you. I'm not interested in having fun. I'm not in a mood for that right now. We can't date. We can talk. We can do this work day, but we're not going to do this play day. You will suffer because you've got to remind yourself that there's something better. There's something more. There's something more advanced than what you're going through right now. You've got to be able to remind yourself why you fell in love in the first place. You've got to find joy in your day. You've got to find gratitude in your day. You've got to find the ability to laugh and have fun. Even when nations who are at war are in conflict, sometimes they have moments of peace. They're called peace treaties, right? They've agreed that for this period of time, we're not going to engage in war. We are going to engage in peace. And you've got to be able to do that in your recovery process. You've got to push pause on the hard conversations. You got to push pause on all the hard emotions. And you've got to intentionally engage each other and have fun. Think about every time you go on a vacation. You may be in a dark place, but you say to yourself, you know what? We're going away. I don't feel like fighting and arguing. Can we just make a decision that we're going to have a good time? Can we just leave our problems at home? And because of that agreement, you have one of the best experiences on this vacation. And as soon as you get back, into that home, you're on, right? It's back to the arguments and the fights. Now, what did you do? You made a decision that you were going to push pause, had an amazing time, and came back to hell. That means that you have the ability to turn it on and turn it off. It's ultimately up to you. And so likewise, the same way we would treat a vacation like that is the same way that we need to treat a date like that. And we need a repetitious, routine, consistent pattern of constantly coming together to date and have fun because it shifts things in the atmosphere. The chemistry begins to change. One's heart begins to open up. That thick, impenetrable wall begins to come down because you're showing up in an intentional way that you haven't for quite some time. Unfortunately, people engage in affairs and they date their affair partner because they stopped dating their spouse when they said, I do. Because in their mind, that was just a season in our overall relationship. That season's up. We don't have time for that. Do you realize that there are countless couples out there who are miserable by choice because they've chosen not to prioritize their relationship within their marriage? They've chosen to give priority to everything and everyone else except for time spent with each other. They made that choice. And all of a sudden, things begin to fall apart. Things begin to literally pull apart from one another, creating a huge deficit. And this deficit is typically fulfilled by somebody else. So you got to engage in recreational companionship. And number 4, you got to engage in physical intimacy. You got to have sex. Now, I understand this is one of the hardest things to do. You've been betrayed. The last thing you want your spouse doing is touching you. The last thing that you want to do is touch your spouse. So there are triggers associated with coming together. I get that. And this is why the recovery process is so critically important to engage a third party who knows how to guide and navigate you through that process. Let me tell you something, folks. I know couples who've experienced betrayals, and 3 years later, they haven't come together in physical intimacy. So from the affair partner's perspective, one of the things that created a vulnerability in the marriage that caused him or her to make a poor decision to have an affair, one of those reasons was the lack of physical intimacy. Now that we're working on restoring the relationship, we're suffering from more of the same, the lack of physical intimacy. It created a vulnerability then, it creates a vulnerability now. Now, is it fair to just start having sex with your spouse to keep them from cheating? I don't want you to get that message because that's not what I'm communicating. What I'm communicating is there's obviously something wrong. We talk about the post-affair sexual marital patterns that happen in any relationship. I'm not going to go into them today. But in order to get back into a healthy sexual marital pattern is going to take guidance and instruction. Is going to take submitting yourself to the wisdom and expertise of someone else that have helped other couples overcome that challenge to get to a better place. These are the things that you have to do. And so when you engage in sexual fulfillment, recreational companionship, affection, and conversation, those four things, the four things that were present in the affair, when you engage in these things in your marriage, all of a sudden, the healing comes. Guys, I hope that you got something from this conversation, something that would have sparked something in you to say, you know what, I'm ready for that. We've been in pain for too long. We've been going through for too long. We've been disconnected for too long. It's time for a change to come. But a change is not going to come on its own. You have to be a willing participant in the change that you seek. You see that number at the bottom of the screen? You need to text that number. You need to call that number. You need to go to the Couples Academy website so that we can have a conversation about how we can bring healing and restoration to your relationship. Certain things you can do on your own. This should not be one of them. Guys, I hope you got something out of today's conversation. We'll see you tomorrow for another great conversation as we go deeper into the topic of affair recovery. Take care.